Peter Lanchidi, who is an associate professor at Orge and an assistant professor at the Institute of Art at ELTE University in Budapest. He has studied art history, aesthetics, and Jewish studies. He wrote his PhD at Ben Gurion University at the Negev, and as an Azrieli Fellow, and his doctoral dissertation was awarded the Thesis Prize of the European Society for the Academic Study of Western Esotericism in 2023. And his book on Freemasonry and Kabbalah is coming out at Oxford University Press later this year.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, especially so that 2 days ago I wasn't sure that I will make it, because we were stuck at the airport for half a day and everything was cancelled, but yesterday we made it. So let me start with my talk. So, the years of the July monarchy in France from 1830 to 1848 saw a fierce debate over Jewish religious reform. Reformists and conservatives were involved in a heated controversy over whether Judaism, its laws, rituals, customs, and religion in general should be reformed, and if yes, how and to what extent, or whether it is untouchable. A Hungarian rabbi living in Paris took a conservative stand in a debate, but a rather unusual one, both in its content and form. He made a large Kabbalistic lithograph, the iconographic program of which centers around the connection between nature and Judaism. In my talk, first I will introduce the rabbi, David Rosenberg, the author of the Kabbalistic artwork. Then, following a brief overview of the Jewish religious reform debate in France during the July monarchy, I will present Rosenberg's polemic as presented in his explication published alongside the lithograph. Against this background, I will guide you through the iconography of the print, after which I will explain what role Kabbalah and nature played in the rabbi's conservative stand in the reform debate. Finally, I will touch upon the reception of Rosenberg's work in the French Wissenschaft circles. So, Rabbi David Rosenberg was born in Hungary in 1793 in a small town still famous for its wine, Tokaj. The center of the Tokaj-Hegyalja wine region in the northeastern part of the country was the cradle of the Hasidic movement in Hungary, as all you know, I'm sure, and home to Sátoralja Újhely, where Rebbe Moshe Teitelbaum was the spiritual leader. As to what extent Kabbalah was part of and parcel of Hasidic ethos and ritual practice is well illustrated by a citation from the Zohar on the eastern wall of the interior to the left of the Torah Ark in the ornately decorated plaster relief shield in mud. Rosenberg must have started his yeshiva studies around 1806, the year when the famous Pressburg yeshiva of Hatam Sofer was established. In his early 20s, Rosenberg moved to Oldenburg, modern time Germany, where he was the rabbi of the Jewish community for 10 years. Besides teaching drawing for children, this is the place where he got acquainted with lithography, the soon-to-be leading printing technology of the 19th century. In 1827, Rosenberg lived for 3 years in the Netherlands, where he was initiated into Freemasonry. In 1830, he moved to Paris, which became his home for the next 15 years. From about 1833, the rabbi managed to get an employment as an assistant in the Royal Library in the Department of Prints, Geographic Maps and Plans, and was busy with producing reduction of maps, the drawing of plans, and working with crayon on all sorts of topographic and calligraphic works. Rosenberg was admitted to the Lodge Les Chevaliers Croisés, the Knights of the Cross, and he rapidly advanced within the Masonic hierarchy. His remarkably fast career is so much the more astonishing as this was a lodge of aristocrats, with dukes, princes, marquises, counts, and barons among its members. The most important and productive period in the life of Rosenberg was his Parisian years. This is when he produced his large Kabbalistic Masonic lithographs, often bi-trio quadrilingual ones, with the aim of revealing deeper Masonic truth. It was in 1841 that he produced the work that is at the center of my talk today, the Aperçu de l'origine du culte hébraïque, survey of the origin of the Hebrew religion. As the Jewish religious reform gives the context of Rosenberg's artwork, it is perhaps not without benefit to give a very short overview of the main questions. The generic term that both described and prescribed the trajectory that contemporary Jewry was expected to pursue within the framework of emancipation was regeneration. What was in need of regeneration was the mores of the Jews that degenerated due to their centuries-long oppression. According to the current essence-form dichotomy, Judaism was to be restored to its essence, the moral precepts. In contrast to this immutable essence, the form was understood to be the external worship, the cult, which degenerated together with the mores. The reformists, as the appellation implies, were to reform Judaism and to modernize Jewry, the socio-economic conditions, education, communal institutions, and religion. The most important forum for the discussion of such many other reform-related questions was the 1840 founded monthly journal, the Archives Israélites de France. Although various aspects, I think I moved one. Yes, the Archives Israélites de France. Although various aspects of regeneration and reform were addressed by rabbis and leading lay intellectuals in print throughout the first half of the 19th century, what triggered the most heated controversy over reform were the Lettres Tsarfatiques and the 1839 draft legislation of the Central Consistory. The Lettres Tsarfatiques were a series of vitriolic letters published by the famous mathematician Orly Terkem, who had very radical reform ideas, such as moving the Sabbath to Sunday. The 1839 draft legislation of the Central Consistory was to put the authority in religious matters in the hands of lay members. Both prompted widespread protests and heated debate. After Rosenberg's biography and this short overview of the reform polemics, now I turn to Rosenberg's work. So Rosenberg's lithograph, together with a 70-page explicatory volume, appeared in 1841, that is at the height of the reform controversy. In the prospectus for the Origine, which was also carried by the Archives Israélites de France, Rosenberg declared that, and I'm quoting, "In recent years it has been observed that our cult has been paralyzed by a multitude of our co-religionists, and that an active and powerful rebellion takes place against religion." The rabbi revealed the reason for the sorry plight of Judaism. He says, "If you think deeply, these efforts seem excusable because the true purpose of many practices is incomprehensible. The priesthood has lost the primitive idea which animated it 2,000 years ago. The ideas of past centuries, poorly understood, have become childish for many, and the crowd wanted to reject them. Thus, the solution lies in education. It is for this purpose that we made a print, the outline of which could give, with the spirit of the Hebrew cult, the origin of all its practices. To make it accessible to everyone, we have accompanied it with an explanatory book. In the introduction of the explication, Rosenberg also points to the fierce debate over religion and the menacing threat of radical reforms. He writes, "Some men, learned and of great mental power and patriotism, seek to assail our religious system by means of its outward manifestation, the form of worship. According to them, everything that is opposed to the received opinions of the majority no matter what be the religious doctrines of that majority, should at once be suppressed. It is not unreasonable to identify these men with Oli Terkem, the author of the Lettres Tzarfatique, and other proponents of radical reform. And indeed, in Rosenberg's work we find discussions of many of the contentious issues of the reform debate, such as the Sabbath, the circumcision, Pesach, and the status of women. Let me turn now to the lithograph. The size of the print is impressive. It's about 1 meter by 65 centimeters. The ornately decorated architectural construct of the artwork is an allegorical representation of the temple of the universe. The edifice is broken up by a remarkable array of openings on various levels and is full of architectural details. The central opening is framed with texts in a frieze-like row of blocks and medallions, topped by an arch and surrounded with a multitude of recesses containing narrative scenes. The whole composition is populated with figures, Jewish religious items, and replete with Kabbalistic symbols and texts. The conceptual framework behind the iconographic program is the organic worldview, the universal harmony between the macrocosm and the microcosm with its intricate correspondences. This view is based on a Kabbalistic reading of Judaism, according to which it is the manifestation of divine law that governs nature. This content is presented in a carefully calculated and didactic way and displayed through a refined and thoughtful design. It is arranged along the vertical axis of the lithograph. The visual and the conceptual foundation of the table is the Ein Sof, surrounded by Shem HaMeforash, and in the focus of the lithograph we see a balcony with a view of creation. The terrestrial globe is emerging from the clouds below the Kabbalistic tree, in other words, the Sephirotic tree, and the planets and the zodiac shed light on the celestial sphere. The upper section of the table, displaying a vault, is where the correspondences between the heavenly order in nature and Judaism is summarized. We see 4 concentric semicircles spanning across the facade, dedicated to 4 themes: the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the elements, planets, and the zodiac, the days of the week and the months, and the 4th considers the parts of the human body. Their harmony with the celestial sphere is demonstrated by the division of the semicircles into 3 sections correlating to the numbers 3, 7, and 12. These numbers bring to light the core correlations that hold the divine and the mundane worlds together, as revealed in Sefer Yetzirah. And this is the reason why Rosenberg placed the entire text of the Sefer Yetzirah as a visual connecting element between the universal heavenly order and our created world. It is inscribed into the 12 frames on the lintel, linking the creation scene and the vault. The narrative scenes provide further confirmation to the overall organizing principle. We see the Passover dinner, on the other side the Sukkot, there's the marriage ceremony, and then we have Tefillin, Talit, and Tzitzit. Now let's turn our attention to the role that nature and correspondences play in Rosenberg's argumentation in the context of the debate on religious reform. The rabbi writes, "We daily behold a class of persons enlightened but not gifted with true light, who criticize the law of Moses and the observances which that law has instituted." And indeed, some of the reformers were of the view, for instance, that instead of Pesach, more recent French historical events should be solemnized. Rosenberg disproved such interpretations by demonstrating how these rites are founded on the correct observation of nature, in case of Passover, on the vernal equinox and the element of fire. But it is not until the very end of the explanatory book that the rabbi exposes openly his conservative principles. He writes, The religion of the Hebrews represents those laws of harmony that govern all nature. This we have fully established. Now nature, from the very fact of being everlasting, can undergo no change or alteration. And that being the case, the usages of religion ought to be held intact and permanent, because they are the reflex of nature. Those, therefore, who assume in any way to reform our observances are bound, in the first instance, to reform nature. There is certainly an echo in this confession of the often quoted phrase from Khatam Sofer, anything new is forbidden according to biblical law. And this holds the key to the understanding why nature and correspondences constitute the conceptual and argumentative backbone of the work. The rites and worship of the Hebrews are tied to the natural and supernatural phenomena since creation. That is, they exist from time immemorial and are engraved in nature, the worldly realm, and the celestial sphere, and hence they not only should not, but cannot be changed. For Rosenberg, faith was universal, originating from the celestial realm, a domain beyond human comprehension and outside the material world of empirical evidence, and therefore accessible only through belief. Consequently, all humans are equal in their faith. Moral values likewise originate from the celestial sphere. They are divinely bestowed and enshrined in the Ten Commandments. It is therefore that for Rosenberg, these moral precepts not only constitute the essence of Judaism, but also serve as the foundation for universal morality. By contrast, the terrestrial domain is the realm of rationality, where evidence takes precedence over belief. In this earthly sphere, individuals are also equal in their materiality, birth, existence, and death. However, cultural differences arise between nations and religions, which are reflected in human institutions. Unlike the essence, this is the form, the differentia specifica of each nation and religion. These institutions are not volume neutral, while enlightened institutions are grounded in universal morality, which in societal context is most prominently manifested in the principle of toleration. Unenlightened institutions are intolerant. This explains why Rosenberg had no problem in identifying with human institutions in various domains of his life, provided that they firmly stood on and loudly declared the universal moral values. Accordingly, Rosenberg could simultaneously be a conservative Jew, an aspiring French citoyen, and a proud Freemason. His conservatism as a Jew was confined to the cult. He aimed to preserve those outward manifestations of Jewish tradition that, in his view, constituted Judaism. As an aspiring Frenchman, he extolled the enlightened monarch of France, where civil law is applied equally to all, and citizens are judged on their merits without the distinction of worship. This equality, he observed, fostered a society where, and I quote, all citizens are loyal to their country and friends of their fellow citizens without distinction of religion. Bourgeois, national guards, soldiers of all faith devote themselves to defending their country with courage. Lastly, as a Freemason, he regarded the fraternity as the sentinel of civilization, an institution embodying the principle of toleration. While many political institutions and religions had been corrupted over the centuries, Freemasons had kept the flame of ancient wisdom alive, transmitting the principle of universal morality through an unbroken chain of initiates. According to Rosenberg's Kabbalistic theology, the only difference between Judaism and Christianity, and hence the only thing that separated Jews and Christians, lay not in the cult, but in the rite. He wrote, "It is certainly only the rite, not the cult, which distances Israelites and Christians from one another, or rather only appears to do so. Once this acknowledged, one can confidently hope for a closer union between the two religions and their adherents. So far, there has been more disagreement about words than about substance. Rosenberg's lithograph and explications are all very intriguing by themselves. However, what is of further interest to us is the reception of the work within the religious reform debate, or rather, the lack of it. So let me turn to our attention to this question. When it came to the understanding of the natural world, the competence of religion increasingly came to be narrowed down to moral and ethical questions. In making sense of the universe, the Sefer Yetzirah and the Ten Sirot came up short against the Newtonian science. Rosenberg cosmology was heir to the emblematic worldview, along with the Aristotelian conception of natural philosophy. However, in the course of gradual transformation of natural history into natural sciences, the hitherto solid concepts of the old science started to crumble, and their explanatory power faded away by the 19th century. With scientificity gaining ground in historiography, historical inquiry was increasingly relying on primary sources, source criticism, and the comparative historical method. In face of the modern historical criticism, the ancient wisdom narrative was losing ground, and in scientific discourse it became discredited. This is yet another point where Rosenberg's discourse, which replete with references to ancients, Pythagoras, the Greeks, the ancient sages in general, fell on deaf ears. The reason for this is that the intellectual framework within which the reform debate unfolded was the Wissenschaft des Judentums, and in broader terms, the new scientificity. The frame of mind of the newly emerged Jewish intellectuals, the university-educated masculine, formed within this milieu. Consequently, their scholarly approach to Jewish history stood on the very same principles as its modern parent discipline. A prime example to this is Adolf Frank's Kabbalah from 1843, one of the first scholarly treatment of the subject. Accordingly, the narration of the sacred history of the Bible was replaced with philological criticism. The historical and political context added an additional characteristic to the Franco-Jewish Wissenschaft project, namely that it was born in the post-emancipation era, and its apologetic aims were to satisfy the degeneration-regeneration narrative. In consequence, one of the chief aims of the French masculine was to peel off the husk of foreign elements of Jewish tradition in order to get to the kernel, the moral essence of Judaism, with the help of new historicism. In fact, and in direct opposition to Rosenberg's stand, it was the minhagim that were announced as heavily polluted with intrusions from other cultures, and the ignorance of the history of these customs was the greatest obstacle to the regeneration of Judaism. We would search in vain for such critical posture in the case of Rosenberg. He stood with 2 feet in the old-fashioned apologetic genre in which authority lied with the sacred text, and hence in no way could have been the origin received as anything even remotely scientific according to the contemporary standard of the Wissenschaft des Judentums. Nevertheless, the chief rabbi of Paris endorsed Rosenberg's work as one that gives rational explanation of the various ceremonies and the prescriptions of Mosaic worship. And while due to its Kabbalistic content it is not accessible to everyone, it provides good religious and moral instruction. In conclusion, I would like to highlight how Rosenberg's peculiar conservatism gained Kabbalistic underpinnings in his works, providing thereby a narrative framework for his worldview, allowing his identities and roles to coexist. As a Jew and man of his time, he regarded Judaism the mother religion of all religions, upon which divine law imprinted universal morality. Likewise, in his view, Judaism and its institutions, having existed since time immemorial, were reflections of the laws of nature. And as a logical consequence, Freemasonry, being rooted in Judaism, reflected these moral precepts and the Jewish cult itself. Here, Kabbalah and its number symbolism assumed decisive importance. As the authoritative ancient Jewish lore, it provided indisputable proof of these correlations and connections. Thank you for your attention.